Here begins Fate's episode.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Phoenix Act and welcome. So, Granblue Fantasy Versus. For anyone who doesn't know, I've been getting back into fighting games over the last couple of years after a long absence, and as such I've been trying out as many as I can get my hands on. So what I'm trying to say is, I'm coming at this not necessarily from a beginner's perspective, but the perspective of someone who's not as familiar with fighting games as some others might be. Also, for anyone who doesn't know, Granblue Fantasy is actually a mobile game with a gacha element that has enjoyed massive success in the East, to the point where it is no longer just a game, but a franchise. It now has an anime, a fighting game made by Arc System Works, which we're going to be reviewing today, and there is supposed to be a regular JRPG coming at some point in the future. Now, let me start by saying I enjoy this game quite a bit. It's different from regular Arc Sys fighting games for reasons that I'll go into, but it's definitely a fun game in its own right. The game endeavours to cater to both newcomers to the genre and to people who are familiar with fighting games with a sort of hybrid control system. There is a simplified method of inputting commands that makes it easier to access most of the character's special moves. For example, using the standard controls, Zeta's Special Wonders is your standard fireball motion of quarter circle forward plus an attack button, but you could just press R1 to do the same move, making it much easier to perform, obviously. However, these simplified controls do come with a downside, as this move comes with variants, as do most of the moves, if not all the moves in this game, and obviously the different variants have different properties depending on whether you execute them using square, triangle or circle. However, using the R1 shortcut will only ever perform the most basic version of the move you get when pressing square on the PlayStation controller. In my opinion, this actually works, as it allows casual players to get into the game easily so they can dip in and have some fun, whilst also reserving something for those willing to put a little extra time into it. So if you're willing to learn the moves properly, you can get the moves to work differently depending on the situation. The game does feel different from other anime fighters in that it is more grounded with a somewhat more considered pace. You'll spend less time having your characters dashing through the air at manic speeds anyway. However, despite this, the game somehow feels fast-paced still, and attacks are most satisfying when they land, feeling very heavy and impactful. The controls are also really good, beyond what I've already mentioned. They feel quick and responsive, so I personally never got frustrated or felt like I was being cheated out of things. If at any point I failed to perform a move properly, I generally thought it felt like it was my own fault. The graphics are absolutely beautiful, as expected from Arc Sys, really, as it uses the same 3D modelling techniques they used for Dragon Ball FighterZ, but in my opinion it looks even better, as it should considering it comes out 2 years later. Everything seems more vibrant, more alive, and the colours seem to pop more, like they built on what they learned when working on their Dragon Ball game. Also, given that this is an Arc Sys game, the animation on Super and Ultra combos, here referred to as Skybound Arts and Super Skybound Arts, is very elaborate and exceptionally well done. Seriously, I don't know of a single other studio that makes their supers look as good as Arc Sys does. Now, one negative that I probably should bring up in this is regards to the roster. It's quite small, with only having 12 characters at launch. This isn't a deal breaker for me personally, but there are people out there for whom this will play a large part in whether they want to purchase the game or not. Fortunately, despite its small size, the roster is nicely varied, with a pretty diverse cast of characters. Each character is very distinct in terms of how they play. You do have your zoners, your grapplers, your rushdown characters, so despite the limited choice, there probably is a gameplay style in here that suits you. The characters are also hugely varied in terms of appearance too. From the huge hulking Ladiva to the diminutive Charlotte, each character has a distinctive appearance that sets them apart from the rest. This is carried over to their animations too, as in both cutscenes and gameplay, and even idle animations, the characters move in a way that clearly conveys their personalities. Characters also have unique intro and wing quotes they say to each other depending on who they're facing. It's only a small detail, true, but I always appreciate it when developers add that little extra level of detail. It really helps to make things feel more polished. I do, however, have one little complaint about the roster, and that's in regards to Jita. For anyone who doesn't know, Granblue Fantasy gives you the choice of whether to play as Gran, the male main character, or Jita, the female main character, as the main character of your game, obviously. So with this in mind, she probably should have been included in the base roster, and the fact that she's being sold as DLC, that they're making you pay for one of the main characters, feels a little bit cheeky. That said, given how female main characters tend to get treated in adaptations of these kinds of games, perhaps I should just be thankful she's being included at all. In terms of gamer modes in Granblue Fantasy Versus, it's more substantial. You have your regular versus mode along with ranked and unranked online play, of course. There were one or two rough matches, but personally I found the netcode to be decent for the most part, or at least not bad enough to be noticeable. But again, I'm only a little above a casual fighting game player at the moment. Those frame delays and the like may be more noticeable to those who spend more time with it. The story mode is interesting, just in concept, as it attempts to fuse in elements of both RPGs and side-scrolling beat-em-ups, and for the most part it succeeds. You customize characters by equipping different weapons on them, and most battles play out something like Double Dragon or Final Fight. However, boss fights do revert to a more traditional fighting game style system, and you can also set another character as your partner and bring them into battle with you in both of these types of play, both regular battles and boss battles, or even ask for help from people online if you're really having trouble. Characters also level up from participating in battle, just like an RPG, and you can equip different sub-abilities on your character to try and gain an advantage. Arxis, in my opinion, still does some of the best tutorials in fighting games too, with different modes designed to teach you not only the basics, but some different techniques and tactics on top. These are also broken down by character, so that once you've found your favourite character, you can specifically go and practice with them. It even gives you advice on different matchups, teaching you how different characters stack up against each other, which is, pretty handy. The arcade mode functions pretty much like any other arcade mode, except that after each round, you get to pick who your next opponent is from 3 options, and each of these opponents will have a difficulty rating attached. And obviously you earn more points depending on which one you pick. Obviously the toughest fight giving you the most amount of points. This also allows you to adjust difficulty more or less on the fly. Say if the last match was a grueling one, you can choose to lower the difficulty of the next. The only place where I found arcade mode lacking at all is with the endings. When you complete a character's arcade mode, you get a still image of them, and that's about it. There's no sort of story there, not even a written paragraph laid over the top of the image to tell you what's up. This would be okay if the game had separate story modes for each individual character, as in Soul Calibur 6, but it doesn't. On top of all that, I've found that I quite enjoy the soundtracks to Arxis games, as they always have that rock feeling that gets your blood pumping and gets you ready for combat. Granblue is no exception. I have no idea whether any of these tracks come from the original game or not, but I found them to be pretty good overall. So overall, yes, I enjoyed Granblue Fantasy Versus, I still enjoy it, and despite a few flaws, it has quite a bit to recommend it. If you're a Granblue fan or a fighting game fan, I would recommend checking it out, and if you're not either of those, maybe give it a rent one weekend to see if you enjoy it. And that's that. I've been Phoenix Act, and until next time, ladies and gentlemen, please take care of yourselves.